Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Courage to Change, a recovery podcast. My name is Ashley Loeb Blassingame, and I am your host. Today, episode 53, is a very special episode. I got to interview the other two co-founders of Lionrock Recovery, Iain Crabb and Peter Loeb. You may remember Peter from season 1, episode 8, where we shared our journey together as father and daughter through my struggles in addiction. And we thought it would be fun to do an episode that talks about another story of trials to triumph, the story of Lionrock. Tune in as we laugh and almost cry about the difficulties of being entrepreneurs, starting and building a company that is years ahead of its time, and reminisce about some of the greatest moments we've had together through this journey. I hope you enjoy this. All right, episode 53. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who identifies in between, welcome to the Courage to Change, a recovery podcast. My name is Ashley Loeb Blassingame, and I am your host. And I am here today with my two co-founders, business partners, mentors, financial distress phone calls, all of the above, Iain Crabb and Peter Loeb. Welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for having us.
So if you've been listening to this podcast for a bit, you may have heard an episode, if Christiana were here, she would tell me, I think it's 8. Episode 8, Peter and I did a podcast together. We did an interview together. But Iain, this is his first time on the podcast, and we wanted to do a podcast talking about Lionrock and how we got here and why we're still here and where we're going and, you know, kind of who we are. So, you know, since Peter, you and I talked a little bit about our story, we'll revisit that. But Iain, tell us a little bit about you and what you did before Lionrock.
Sure. So I did lots of things before Lionrock. Most of them were in the financial area. I did finance support for a couple of companies. One was a big tech company in Silicon Valley. And after that, I was leading the finance department for a renewable energy company. And that's where I met Peter. So a couple of years into my stint there, the founders of that company brought this Peter Loeb guy in with his MBA and his fancy business models and stuff, and they wanted him to help figure out how we could come up with a financing plan to sell more solar power to their clients and stuff like that. So Peter came in and was eventually wrangled into becoming the VP of sales and marketing there, which wasn't necessarily the job I think he had wanted. But anyway, he took it on with great gusto, and he and I got along really well. We bonded over music and our daughters. At that time, Tessa had, I think, just been born. She was like a newborn. And you were, gosh, I think like right out of rehab or something like that. So he was telling me.
That does not narrow things down either.
So he was going through, all these stories.
Scaring the shit out of you.
Exactly. Like, oh, you got this to look forward to in your future. And yeah, introduced me to photos and stories of you and Tori and Marina. And yeah, so he and I just kind of bonded and got along really well. And we were a good business partnership at that company. And that company got bought out, and Peter left a little while after the merger there. And I stayed on for another year doing operations, actually leading a team of construction crews, actually building solar power arrays and things like that. And then Peter and I kept in touch and decided to try and start another venture because I was seeing the writing on the wall at that other company that they were probably going to let me go soon. They were consolidating everything to Colorado. And I was like, sure, let's start something. And so we started chatting every day by video conference. And, then, one day when your Aunt Karen had to go back into rehab and he was dealing with that, he was like, hey, maybe we should start a different company and offer addiction treatment over video conferencing. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Let's explore that. So we did. And 10 years later.
So 2 questions about that. So there was one where you were going to do solar on trash cans.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why that one always sticks in my mind of all the ventures. I don't know.
Well, actually, no, somebody else was doing solar on trash cans. We were looking at different applications of where you could put solar. And we had a bunch of different things. We were looking at like waste heat power generation, which is where you take energy that's being wasted from industrial processes like bakeries, or we even visited what was it? It was like a brick making factory. Remember that, Peter?
I do.
Yeah, because so they had these, big ovens where they cook bricks, and so we were like, well, we could install an electrical generator there, but it was a bad time for the economy, and so that that was not going to work. And we even had one where we were going to deploy. This was a different iteration. We were going to deploy solar powered ATMs.
I remember that one. Yeah.
People could wire money back to like Mexico and things like that, and we were going to deploy them in different locations, like even in like farm work fields and things like that. Anyway, a lot of crazy ideas.
I still think that would have worked.
we still have like Google SketchUps of these ideas of like shipping containers with built-in televisions and ATM machines and vending machines with solar power on the top. It's so kind of wacky, wild ideas.
I remember first of all, as the kid of a serial entrepreneur, right, who grew up in Silicon Valley. So not just the kid of a serial entrepreneur, but the kid who grew up around also other serial entrepreneurs. I remember around that time, and Peter had been in a lot of different businesses, but I remember him talking to me about this, and he was talking about like the ATMs and the trash cans. I never heard about the brick factory, and I was like, so you're going into the trash can business? Like what? Just like each iteration was, so you're going into the waste management business? Like, should I be, is this like a Sopranos undertone? What's happening here?
Yeah, well, you grew up with him, so you heard many, many different, business ideas, and he's still doing them, by the way.
Oh, I know. It was always like that. So how old were you when you met Peter? If I was
about 30 or so.
Okay.
What was it? It was 08, 07.
Yeah, then I was 30.
Yeah, I think it was 07. I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when Peter first started talking about me and Tess had just been born, you obviously thought, this is going to be the person that I definitely want to go into business with. I bet that was your first thought.
That was not a thought at that point in time.
The funny thing for me was that I came into that company and didn't want to take a real job because I wanted to be able to sort of bounce around and not be in anyone's chain of command right away. And so people would ask me in the company, so wait, what do you do here? And I would say, oh, I'm just trying to help out, and they would say, no, you're coming in, you're going to be everyone's boss. And no, I'm just trying to figure things out. And what became clear was that we needed to push authority to get things done away from the center, because the 2 founders couldn't let go of any process in its entirety. And so they thought that was delegating. They would delegate little pieces out, but not the whole thing. And so it was still going through them. So as I was talking to people in different parts of the company, and I would say to them, I think we should do it this way. Let's change it to that. Their first reaction was complete terror, because no one did anything without the founders. Okay. And the idea that they could actually operate without doing that just wasn't the company's culture. And what I found is that if Iain said it was okay, then they would do it. So if Iain and I together showed up and said, okay, we're going to change how things work, we're going to do this, as long as Iain was there, they'd go along with it. So that was sort of the genesis of working together, and turned out we were able to get things done. So that was a good start.
Yeah, I think everyone at first thought you were there to fire them.
Right. Yes, everyone. Right.
You're at this small company and it's co-founders, mom and pop kind of place that's grown up to be, a big company. And they bring in this MBA guy. So of course everybody's thinking, oh, he's here to like clean house and like fire everyone. So I think that's part of the terror. And then, because they controlled everything so tightly. And, we're going through this now at Lionrock, 10 years in. Where we're all taking our different hats off. We've been wearing 8 different hats for years and years, and now we're having to, slowly start removing them. And it's a process.
Yeah, there's definitely discomfort in it for sure, but there's discomfort in having 8 hats too. So true. I suppose it's all just a lot of growth opportunity.
Just a lot of discomfort.
It's just a lot of discomfort. Iain, you were in the wine biz.
Yeah, I had it was never like a full-time gig, but I had a side sort of hustle.
It's a wine side hustle, me too.
A wine side hustle. Yeah.
It's just a hobby.
My family actually grows grapes. So, and then some friends of mine in college had gone to Cal Poly, and they were doing the wine program there, and they had access to like free grapes. So we were like, just, making wine for fun.
God, I feel stupid for not doing that. The legitimacy, I can feel it now.
Right. Yeah. So it was a little weird. The very first, few months of Lionrock, I was still selling off. Here we are, working on this addiction treatment business, and I'm selling off the last of the wine that we had made.
It's amazing.
But I got rid of it.
So, Peter and I come to this business honestly, as people would say. I don't even know if that term works here, but how you have had experience, addiction has touched your life, mental health has touched your life. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about why the topic of addiction and mental health treatment was even on the table for you, aside from the desperately wanting to work with mentally ill people?
Yeah. So it was actually the day that it hit home in my family. Like I didn't grow up. My parents, they're British, drink a beer here and there, but they never really, I don't think I have ever seen them drunk, but through my marriage, my wife has some addiction and mental health in her family. And so it hit home one day. It was actually the day that we got the company that Peter and I were working at together got bought out. And so it was like a really crazy day. And I was driving home from work, and my wife called to say that her family member had tried to overdose on a bottle of pills. And we knew that she had mental health issues in the past, but this was like, life and death, really serious. And so she was in the hospital in a coma. Yeah, it just hit really close to home. So we actually flew out to where she was in Wyoming, and we were thinking that we were going to have to tell them to take her off life support. It was really, really crazy. And luckily, cooler heads prevailed, and some people at the hospital said, well, maybe we should try something else and move her down to a different hospital. And they did. And my wife was there for weeks, separated from me and my daughter. And luckily, she rebounded and came back and did go into a treatment facility for a while. And then came and lived with us. So yeah, it had hit home actually right around the time that I met Peter and stuff like that. So I was able to, even though I hadn't had it very close to my family in the past before that, I was able to understand what you guys had gone through to some degree. I mean, not quite to the same level, but mental health and addiction sort of took on a new meaning for me at that point.
And this family member came and lived with you.
Yeah.
What was that like, having that in your home, especially having never experienced it before?
Right. It was really stressful because obviously, I think after what she had gone through, even though she's made a full recovery now, I think there was probably some like temporary, brain damage or something. And so, because like at first half of her face was paralyzed, and so there was clearly some very serious like damage, which is all resolved. It's amazing. And that's the other thing, is like just the power of humans to heal and recover. That was the other like big lesson there, was that, people do recover, they do heal, and even from things that you think are beyond impossible, and they're not going to come back from. And then you see them do it. And, we see this with people every day at Lionrock, which is really rewarding to, and, you become a believer in healing,
What are some of the things that you have seen or that you've learned over the last 10 years with regard to addiction that, despite having lived with that, you didn't see before?
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma. We all, know about that. I don't think I was really one of those, point the finger, those people kind of, I just didn't have that mindset about it. But, I've learned to, I've talked to so many of our clients over the years, like, because, Peter and I have been the tech support for a long time at Lionrock. So, it's amazing. Clients for years and years would call in and expecting to get, tech support, and they get the CEO or the chief financial officer, and they're like, okay, and so I've gotten to know a lot of our clients, and on a personal level, and had them, sometimes break down. That was kind of one of the early lessons, like working with technology and people with, mental health issues, is that, they're very fragile when they first come in. And so many of these people, like, their self-esteem was so like beat down that, just getting like onto a computer program was something that seemed impossible for them. And so, you'd get on the phone with them, and they would be struggling to deal with it. And they'd be like, no, I can't do this. And you have to talk them through it. And so I was ending up doing, not counseling, but, I was having to coach them through, like, no, this is not you. Like, technology can be tricky sometimes. Like,
right.
Don't beat yourself up. You're going to, this is okay. This is not a reflection of you as a person. It's
right.
just, there's
system.
Yeah. The system. It's hard. Like, and for people who haven't done it before, it can sometimes be, tricky to get it going and stuff like that.
Yeah. Our self-esteem when we come in we're so used to failing at everything and being a disappointment at everything. And everything seems, we use the word catastrophizing. Like, every word we use is like, I'm a failure. The world's ending. Everything is this enormous deal. And so, yeah, like, people, even hitting the wrong button on the computer can set off this shame spiral, particularly when you're, at your bottom. So that totally makes sense. What about you, Peter? You knew a lot about addiction when we started this company, having been through all my family weeks and talked to the myriad of professionals that you brought in to help on my case. And then the myriad of professionals that you had contact with my Aunt Karen, your sister. So, in the past 10 years, though, I'm sure that you've actually still really absorbed a lot of new information. I'm curious, like, what are the things that stand out for you?
Well, I think the biggest change came actually right at the beginning, because, you had managed pretty well, after all was said and done, to find recovery, and were, making your way forward, which was an incredible relief, as any parent in that situation will tell you. And then my sister, who had been struggling, her whole life, died. And I guess that was kind of a shock in a way, because I sort of had it in my head that, you were doing okay and had made it through, and that she'd been at it a lot longer. And that, I guess I sort of thought that, we had this, I was overconfident, and
like the same recipe would work with her.
Yeah. And the recipe had been working with other people. I mean, I hadn't, now I've seen thousands of people come through our program, but at the time, the set of people I knew who had been through treatment and into recovery was much smaller, but no one I knew well had died. And her death really brought home to me that this is a serious thing, that this is that it's, it's not to be trifled with. And so I think that was for me, that was a really heavy lesson, and one that really made me want to work in the field, especially because we had, stumbled into, telehealth. I mean, now it's called telehealth. Back then it was called, I don't even know what it was called. That won't work.
Yeah, I was going to say it was called That Crazy Idea.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, even last week we ran into people who we had seen, 8-9 years ago, who told us last week, oh, I thought you guys were crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was fun. Those years of being told we were, crazy. But over the years, what I've, I guess, how would I encapsulate that?
Like some things that you thought you understood that by being on, on the front lines in the business, that you gained an understanding that changed your perspective.
Well, I guess, what pops into my mind first is how many people there are in our field who really aren't coming with the best of intentions to the business side, which has been very disappointing for me. I've worked on Wall Street. I've worked in the video game business, worked in the energy business with Iain, and I've never been in a field.
Worked in the music business.
Worked in the music business. I've never been in a field before that was as impure, frankly, as what I've seen in healthcare, which is really disturbing. Especially because, and you remember, Ashley, throughout a lot of the early years, we would see people doing things that were clearly beyond the law. And the regulations are very restrictive. So, I mean, that is certainly to be said. But there was a lot of money going around that it was pretty obvious what shouldn't have been going around. And we would talk about it, and I would say, you just can't, it just comes back round. You don't do that. It's the wrong thing to do, and you will get caught eventually.
That was the thing that for years you said to me, because, I was in my early 20s, all my friends who are in the business, my contacts, I don't know about friends, but contacts are making all this money. And I'm coming to you saying, are we doing something wrong? Because, this, is what's happening here. And I remember you saying, trust me, I've seen this before. This is what happens, and it comes back. It just takes time. And then a couple of years ago, I mean, we saw that reckoning. I mean, they in
the news and everything.
South Orange County and in Florida, and we saw, they just came and cleaned it up, but it took years. And that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing experience is good for, pattern recognition. The only thing we get as we get older, pattern recognition. Yeah, so I think that was a big deal for me, it's been interesting to see the interplay between the medical establishment and the sort of grassroots recovery world that sometimes are sort of in sync, but more often than not are in sort of a tug of war for control, where the mainstream healthcare folks want to integrate addiction treatment with the rest of mental health, which actually in some ways makes a lot of sense. But they also are really excited about having a prescription they can write. And, they don't entirely recognize, I mean, obviously the astute ones do, but as a group, they don't see it as the chronic problem that it is, that it requires deep work up front and continuing vigilance and growth, because we're not really dealing with substances. We're dealing with people and who are using substances to cope. And that distinction, however subtle that may be, gets lost a lot. So that, one of the things for me, I'm out talking to corporate people, investors, possible distribution partners, and the level of stigma, the level of prejudice that I encounter when talking about what we do is surprising. It has been surprising. I'm not surprised anymore, but it's been surprising because people just simply don't understand.
How does that feel as the dad of somebody who, when someone is saying those people and you have a kid who is those people.
Yeah, my kid, my sister, lots of people in our family. I guess it makes me more determined. So maybe it's not a bad thing. It's easy to give up when you do startups. It can be, I can't remember which one of the venture investors who was quoted as saying there are two emotions in startup world, terror and euphoria, and nothing in between. So, it's a rough existence. Everyone thinks you're dope and you should be doing something more mainstream. And unless it takes off right away, why aren't you Pinterest? So I think that, feeling that stigma coming from people made me want to double down because the people who are affected by this are people in my family, people I know, my friends, so.
Yeah. And as we've been out there talking to people, one of the other things we've realized, which is, funny, but when you look back and you've been in other businesses, you realize there's kind of a drinking culture.
Oh yeah,
in a lot of the corporate world, and so Peter and I are out there sometimes talking outside of the addiction treatment industry to people, and they'll be like, "Well, I drink. Do I have a problem?" Or you realize
you become the counselor. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, or like Ash, that conference we went to last year where, they were breaking out the cocktails at like 2 p.m.,
2 p.m. I mean, they had mimosas, the morning drink you're allowed to have that I never knew about. Therefore, I became the alcoholic. But had I added orange juice, I would have been good. They were handing those out. And then, I was like, wait a minute. I thought you couldn't drink at work. All of these things.
Or in the morning.
The morning at work. I was like, you guys, there's nothing wrong with me. I fit just fine. And just getting hammered. And yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. And a mainstream, health conference, right? And, there's drinking going on from, whenever people finish their mimosas at 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. when they brought out the cocktail cart, and that's the way in a lot of business gets done over drinks. And so, as we've been trying to push Lionrock, into sort of like mainstream business world out away from just, they're happy to talk about mental health actually a lot more than they're willing to talk about addiction. I think because, so many people, especially in sales and different things like, the drinking is part of the deal there. So, we have to work around that and help them understand.
Yeah, I think a big, personally, this is Ashley's, TED Talk, but I think that mental health and addiction are the same. I mean, they're in the same, it's all in your head. I mean, you don't, I've never met a drug addict or an alcoholic who didn't have depression ever,
right.
Or some sort of anxiety. Now that may have been drug induced, but it's still there. It's still a symptom, right? And all of these, it's in our head, and we started drinking and using or whatever your thing is for a reason. There was something going on, which makes it a mental obsession. And I'll tell you that the other piece is that if you remove from an alcoholic or a drug addict, if you remove alcohol or drugs from them, they're not cured. That means the problem isn't the drugs or the alcohol, it's in the head, right? So, I stand to think that there's a whole wave coming of like, let's just, keep, bring these things together. But that's the separation to me seems silly, but that's my belief system.
That's part of the stigma because think about, what diseases could we name by their symptoms, right? I'm a sneezist, no, I have a cold, I think it's just that, the confusion.
Diabetes is a good, right. Your type 2 diabetes, right? We don't talk about that with what's actually happening.
Right. No, the thing is that alcohol and drugs are, in this context, are used for recreation by the majority of people. And so when somebody is seen to be overdoing it, the first assumption is, hey, what are you doing? You don't need to do that. No one sees the driver. And I think that's the that's the struggle is that people in general, my line is if alcoholics were drinking motor oil instead of champagne or, whiskey, everyone would very quickly understand what was going on, because you'd say, you're drinking motor oil? What?
Yeah, but if someone's smoking meth, yeah, but
it's still getting high. People associate the relief. Listen, everybody who comes home from work and, it's wine o'clock, everyone who comes home from work and has a drink in the majority of mainstream people who drink, quote unquote, normally are in fact using alcohol for the same purpose that people with a substance use disorder do. It's a matter of degree. And the people who are the mainstream people who are using it, by our cultural standards appropriately, use it as a gentle, anxiety reducer. Whereas the people who have a lot of anxiety are using it proportionately more. And
right. Maybe it's proportional.
But we don't draw the distinction there. We don't see you might say, oh God, I need a drink. You come home from work, it's been a terrible day. We don't see that that's the same thing that somebody who gets up in the morning with massive anxiety is doing when they drink in the morning. We don't, because that anxiety disorder is not well understood, not well known, not seen. We just see the symptom of it. And that's why we call it, or we used to call it, alcoholism. It's the symptom.
Right. It's the symptom. So you guys, when I joined Lionrock, and we still didn't know what our business model was and didn't have any clients and, joined this idea, right? Like, even I was like, this is never going to work. I don't know what we're doing here. What year was that? 2000 and...
You went from drinking alcohol to drinking the Kool-Aid.
It was 2011, Ashley. I was actually just looking at it the other day.
Okay, 2011. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was not long after we started in 2010.
Late 2010.
Late 2010. Yeah. Karen passed away in May.
Yeah.
August 6th.
It was August 6th?
Yeah.
Okay.
She went back to rehab in May.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah. I knew there was some connection to your birthday. Yeah. It was your 50th birthday.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Ashley, you came in, you were informally advising us from the beginning, but you came in 2011.
Yeah. I left.
I remember the day where I was really sure that we weren't going to go anywhere without you, which was I was on the phone helping one of our early clients get set up with our systems, doing tech support. And in the middle of it, and she sounded completely sober, I just want to say before I tell the story. And we were going through the paces of it and putting stuff together and making it work and all that. And in the middle of it, she broke down crying. And she said that she just couldn't do it and this, that, and the other. And she just had, I think she had 2 bottles of wine already. It was noon or something. And she had a full breakdown on the phone with me, and I had no idea what to do. And thank goodness, Ashley, you were in the house with me wherever that was that this was going on.
It was at your house.
No, and I turned to you and with wide eyes, and I just handed you the phone, and you talked her down off the ledge, and then got her to reconnect with us the next day, and we made it all happen. But I realized how completely unequipped I was to engage her, and so I was awfully glad you were there.
Yeah, I used to keep a little cheat sheet of sayings that you had told me, like cheat sheet of Ashley's, tips on, people who came on live chat or called or things like that, okay, drink a glass of water and go to bed. different things like that.
I did say
because
that.
We would have so many people would come on our chat thing before we had other employees. And, like Peter said, we weren't really equipped to handle it all the time early on, especially when it was just us.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know that was a skill. It's one of those things where, and I think this is where I really struggled when I was building our admissions, before I was the only one answering with a Google spreadsheet, was that I really didn't know what I was saying to people was intuitive from experience. And I had no idea how to give that to anyone else, really, without any, it was really interesting for me. It really made me understand why I needed to not get math tutors who were really intuitively good at math. When you know something that intuitively, it is so hard to to get out unless you're used to doing that. It was so hard to get out. And, I had been to, once the one thing that's interesting or whatever, I don't know how unique it is at this point, but about my story is that I have been in so many different programs with so many different therapists in so many different modalities. I mean, just exhausted. So I used to joke that I have more clinical hours, that I had been in for 2 years. It's a long time to be saturated and inundated with that stuff every single day, all day long. New people coming in drunk, your roommate's drunk, your roommate's detoxing, your other roommate's, sober a long time. Like you just are inundated with this. And it was interesting to see that. And it's also what's interesting is that from that same perspective, which is this inundation, like not really understanding how much I knew about it, not really understanding my ability to talk to those people. But here, the other thing that's been interesting over this past 10 years is that I have insulated myself from the stigma so intensely. And so it's been interesting hearing stories. These corporate stories are going out and talking to the corporations or different experiences, either relayed by you guys or some that I've had, where people are judgmental about addiction because I don't associate
where you live.
Where I live, what I, my group, my husband's sober, so I don't have it with his, like the level of insulation I have to critique about it is unbelievable because all I hear is how proud everybody is. And, even from, my grandparents who probably would have been in that crowd, they were proud, so it's been so interesting to hear like, oh, people really still think that?
Oh yeah, they sure do.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they just don't tell me because they know I'm in recovery. It's not really useful to tell me. They think I'm a piece of shit.
They just don't understand is really what it comes down to at the end of the day. I mean, one of the stories I tell is, if you work in an emergency department and at a hospital and people come in, and one of the stories I tell is if you go in and you say you were an intravenous drug user, you get treated terribly. And that's, of course, speaking from your experience, Ashley, not mine, because I haven't actually done that. But
yeah, note to self, don't tell them that right away if you can avoid it. It's not a fun experience.
But the flip side of that is that on a daily basis, they see people who are coming in who are looking for drugs, which is, of course, what their immediate suspicion is. And
for sure,
it's easy, I think, out at 14 years clean and sober. Thank God. Thank you, Ashley, for making that real. That it's easy to forget what
we look like out there.
Yeah, people in the throes of active addiction are,
we are pieces of shit.
It can be pretty awful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is the truth that I think that's one of the components actually of getting sober is like, hey, I was a piece of shit and I was terrible to you. And kind of just owning that, because when you do first get sober, in the mind of the addict has changed it so everyone else is at fault every time. I mean, every time. There's a reason we are the victim of the world in such a special way. And so when you're coming out of that, one of the ways that you change, your neural pathways from a scientific perspective and from an emotional perspective, kind of your what we would call your perception, is by saying like, wow, I did things in the pursuit of, there was a reason I was in the pursuit of these things. This is how I justified it. But I was if you took those behaviors, that's a bad person. That's what bad people do. So that's very confusing, right? I mean, I totally and 100% understand why the stigma is there, because we act like people who are bad people. And maybe they're, maybe bad people, quote unquote, are sick people, right? Like maybe that's full circle, but I do understand why it is so difficult to think that. But people have I guess addiction is there's still judgment about it even when you're sober.
Yeah.
Well, that's the part I don't really get. It's like, well, I'm sober. Why
But you did bad things 14 years ago.
That you weren't there for, you know, that's the part where that always surprises me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Iain, I was 23 when we started working together, and and I'll go to Peter from the family perspective, but we have this really cool trio, right? Where each of us has a very different skill set. You guys probably overlap more than I do, but we still, each of us has a very different personality, Peter and I are overlap there, but skill set. And I think it's made our partnership really functional in that we don't need to, we don't try to get into each other's way, because that's his lane. I'm not trying to do that. And, but from the perspective of, we have this family, connection with Peter being my father. What has it been like? And you can be honest. No one's going anywhere now. Yeah, nowhere to run. Or what are some of the adaptations you've had to do with founding a company with, a father and a daughter, family member, whatever angle you want to dissect it from?
There's certainly things I've had to adapt to, in terms of you two, and, sometimes just letting the personal dynamic between father and daughter just play out, and I'll just, sit on the sideline and let you two have that out. Okay. This is an unresolved thing from Ashley's childhood here. I'll just let it work out.
Oh boy.
I think we've managed it all quite well. And like you said, we all have a very different skill set. Ashley, you've picked most of our counselors, not a skill that I have any, possibility of being a good judge of, and Peter is always coming up with new ideas, which I think is amazing. And I see my job as, largely sort of executing on those ideas. Not that I don't have,
don't give yourself credit. You have lots of great ideas.
But I'm naturally more inclined to want to keep going with things that, we've established and get them humming. And then Peter's like, oh, I got this great idea, so there's kind of a natural,
and everybody's butt cheeks kind of quench up real tight when they hear that.
Yeah. There's this natural sort of push pull, not that Peter's not a great CEO, but he's an entrepreneur, I think, at heart, and so I think we all bring different, skills to the table. And I think we've worked well, given the family connection that you bring in. And it's, it's made it all the more easier, Ashley, that you're great to work with, and, you bring in something that we don't have, so we need you, and we've needed you since the beginning.
And of course, also you have plenty of experience working with, in family companies, because the company where we met was run by a husband and wife team. So you had to get in the middle of that from time to time.
Ooh,
right. I was more of the outsider there, though. They had started it, and I think they were 4 or 5 years into the business when I came in.
Yeah.
And I was like the first hat that they took something off and had entrusted somebody else outside of their family to come in and run something. So there
was a brother there too.
You're right. Yeah. It was husband, wife, and a brother. Yeah.
Stay tuned to hear more in just a moment. Hi, it's Ashley, your beloved host. When I'm not hosting the Courage to Change a Recovery podcast, I'm running the recruiting department at Lionrock Recovery. We are always looking for amazing licensed mental health counselors, along with various other sales and operations positions that pop up from time to time. The Lionrock culture is one of collaboration, support, and flexibility. Our employees work from home offices all over the country, utilizing technology to connect to one another. We are always hiring. So if you want to have the best job ever, check out our open positions and apply at www.lionrockrecovery.com/about/careers. Yeah, it's been, it's an interesting from, working with my dad is a really cool experience that we get to have this like mission and thing we do together and to interface all the time and, grow together. I mean, it's an excuse to hang out and all this stuff. And at the same time, right? Like, I remember early days we'd be in, I don't think they were serious meetings, but we'd be in meetings, the three of us, and Peter's like, he's a CEO and of our PowerPoint. And and we're sitting at the table and he says something that I deem unacceptably dumb. And I turned to him and I'm like, God, you're an idiot or something. something that you cannot say to the CEO. Yeah, the CEO. And I remember a couple of times after the meeting, you pull me aside, you're like, I love you. And you cannot say that to me at the table with other people. I was like, oh, sorry, save that for later. Like, just having to learn, particularly in our family culture where respect.
We have a tendency to say what we think.
Yeah. And authority is a weird dynamic. Like there's a lot of like, it's much more on a peer level. I mean, it's there, but so that was definitely a challenge. Like, oh, he's the CEO and everybody else here knows that. You need to not tell him he's a dingleberry in the middle of the meeting. So that was an interesting growing experience. And also learning to like, am I upset because I was told what to do? Am I upset because I was told what to do by my dad? Am I upset because, working through those things emotionally and recently, I don't know what Peter did, but it pissed me off. And I think it took me 20 minutes and then I was done with it, moved on. And we had a phone call later. It was fine. And it was, major, like, oh, I've figured out how to really separate those things, process them through and move on. And that's been I mean, frankly, without it, it probably would have never worked.
Yeah, for me, it's been really cool to see the two of you. I mean, I didn't know you in your teen years, but I remember when we were kind of early into this and the three of us had gone to a conference together and, Peter said something to you and you the feeling I took away from it was like, okay, there's some like, unresolved stuff here. Like she's mad at him for something that happened in, her teen years. And the other thing I don't know to the extent this is true. I don't think I've ever asked you to this, but you were gone for a lot of those years. And so I think this in some ways has been sort of an opportunity for the two of you to, catch up on some of those years. You were either checked out mentally because you were using or you were often in rehab. And so there was a lot of time there that a parent would normally be with their teenager, getting to know them as they grow up. And some of that I think was kind of cut out for you guys. And, through this, partnership that we have, I think you tell me if I'm hitting it here, but yeah. I think there's been a reconnection for you guys.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
Well, it's been a very healing thing, I think, for our family just generally, because those teenage years were pretty much an unmitigated disaster. I mean, the only thing that didn't happen, thank God, was that there was permanent damage, multi-decade incarceration or death. I mean, Ashley was very lucky multiple times to make it through. And, I mean, there's nothing more to say about that. I mean, that's what it is. And we've been able to rebuild a lot of our family bonds, just generally, even beyond just Lionrock, but in our family through this mission that we've taken on. So it's been a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great observation. It took interesting because it took me and my mom longer to rebuild our relationship, I think, because we had less contact. And as I got older and we start spending a lot more time together, that time together that we hadn't had.
Then you had a child or two, and and then
we spent a lot of time together. So
right, and you had something in common at the deepest level, really.
Right. And so it did. So similar to the way Lionrock helped to heal our relationship, I think that helped to heal the relationship with my mom. Although I don't think it was bad, it just changed. And it's true. Like it is a weird thing. You know, I didn't live with my sister, my youngest sister. I didn't live with her for very long. I mean, compared to so we have this weird, and the time that I was there, I was so checked out. And so we have this, we've talked about that before, like her relationship with my other sister, having been in the same home for longer together, they have bonds that you just have, or experiences together, childhood experiences together you have that I missed out on. So yeah, it's been a cool, a healing experience, and a scary experience, because we're all in it we're all in this together. And I don't know how long I thought it was going to take, I guess I didn't think it was going to, I don't know what I thought. I think along the way I've thought different things, but I definitely didn't think it was going to take 10 years to become mainstream, that it was going to be as hard as it's been, that we were going to be as scared as we were at times of having built the company to a significant amount and still being afraid that we weren't going to make payroll, or still being afraid that we weren't going to whatever, and then coming through and doing it. Just the amount, the terror, the euphoria. And, I had no idea what we were in for. I don't know if you guys did, but I did not have any.
Well, it takes to start a business, I think it takes a certain degree of insanity, because you kind of have to convince yourself that it's going to work. Otherwise you'd never start it. Right. So, you have to, put crazy business models together that show you getting to, $10 million in revenue in 3 years and things like that.
I just believed your models.
Just to give yourself some hope, and then it doesn't happen, and you adjust and you move forward. But, over time, I eventually, not that I don't still get, terrified and scared by it, but eventually it was like, okay, well, we've done this, we've gotten on the ropes before and we've come back from it, and we'll do it again,
Yeah, every year there seems to be something that, scares the crap out of us that happens. In December, as we were wrapping up the year and, cautiously patting ourselves on the back, as we did when we doubled in size last year, which was quite a feat, and we were happy that we were able to do it. And Iain and I were joking as we were planning, we were doing numbers one day, so what do you think it's going to be in 2020? Because every year somewhere around, and really this
March.
is the truth, March, somewhere, beware the Ides of March, right? As Julius Caesar did not. Something happens. Google changes their algorithm and sinks our SEO, or I can't even remember all the things.
Legit scripts.
Well, yeah. Something happens seems like every March that knocks us back, and we've sort of gotten used to the idea that, and we were literally joking about, okay, 2020, what's it going to be this year? Pandemic? No, that really never crossed our mind.
No. I mean, imagine if someone had told you that no, 2020, there's going to be a pandemic, and every single treatment center in America, maybe the world, is going to be doing telehealth.
Excellent.
I mean, there's just not a planet on which we would have there's no way we would have believed that.
Well, it's a long time joke, overnight success in only,
10 years.
a decade.
Yeah. I think that was actually an interesting thing that, you quoted that man who said about being an entrepreneur, terror and euphoria. And I think for me, I felt those things at the same time. I think I was very much like, oh, it's happening. Oh, no, it's happening. I don't even know what's happening. Just absolute terror and euphoria at the same time.
Well, it's a funny thing to see all of the jokes that we've been making for all these years now embedded in television commercials, where they're all in video, together, and someone says, I'm not wearing any pants. We were making that joke a decade ago.
Or when you're Zoom, da 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 da. Or,
yeah. I tell people we've been using Zoom since 2014. So this is our daily existence. I saw in the news this morning that Twitter CEO said that they can work from home forever. And I thought to myself, like Lionrock, for a decade, alert the media. Wow.
Well, I mean, who was it? Your dad or someone used to tell you you're just too early. Like you have had, your whole...
Yeah, I'm always too early.
You're always too early, but, so you were really too early, but we held on long enough.
Yeah. Michael Cartwright, who was the founder of Foundations Recovery Networks and American Addiction Centers, told me back in the day when we were saying it was going to be 5 years, he said, no, it's going to be 10. And I remember saying to him, well, I sure hope not. But, but yeah, it was 10. It was 10. But being mainstream brings its own challenges. It's, we're going through, the struggle to double in size every year requires us to rethink everything we do, to rethink how we do what we do, how, as Iain was saying earlier, how many hats we're going to wear, who's going to wear them. There's so many. Growing up a company is complicated, and every entrepreneur out there has been through the same set of things. We're not special that way, but it is. It continues to be very stimulating. That's for sure. Not boring.
Yeah, definitely not boring. Definitely not boring. And I continue to be, I find I just have an internal resistance to change, no matter what it looks like, or to new, the things that the entrepreneur, there's an entrepreneur in me, but she has to say no like 3 times first before I have to say it can't work. It won't work if I do, I have to, I'm working on that piece, but I do remember, I was talking to somebody about how, early on I was like, well, it has to be perfect before we launch it. Like we have to, whatever it was had to be, whether it was a website or it was, we can't launch a plan without having every aspect of it thought through, and now I'm like, nope, get it up. We got to just get it up. Let's go. We got to keep moving. And, you just, the amount of lessons that you learn doing this and the amount of challenges is so broad. There's so many different things that I don't think are the same if you're just working for a company.
Yeah. It's an exercise in letting go. I was thinking about this just yesterday, actually, about, some of our systems and things like that, and how, I'm constantly trying to tweak them and get them better and all this stuff. But you can easily, you would paralyze yourself, I think, if you didn't just let go and move on and keep going. You'd just be paralyzed, because you can never, things are changing so fast that there's no way to ever get control of it all. And so, it's, you just have to, like, you're like guiding a ship, in a stormy ocean, and you set the compass and go, and don't get too caught up. You have to attend to the details, of course, but you don't get too caught up in every single one of them, or you just be paralyzed and not get anywhere, or you stress yourself, to death.
I think we work with a lot of perfectionists because so many people in our company are in recovery. And I've noticed a sort of a strong strain of perfectionism that runs through. I think one of the things that drives, people to use is that life is so imperfect and so unpredictable and so then you, as you were saying before, Ashley, you take away the substances, you're still that same person. What you really have to do is learn better coping skills. So it's very common for us to have a lot of perfectionists. And I have trouble I push the idea a lot that, I need B plus A minus at twice the speed, not A plus at half the speed. We need momentum is so critical.
You're right. Those are the same things that when Iain was talking about like making systems, but I look around my house and I think to myself, like, of all the systems or situations that need to be made better and how much money, and all the different things. And I really can drive myself nuts. And then the other way I go, because of the extremes, is, okay, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm not going to improve anything. Who cares? We're all going to die. It's going to hell, and then I'm in a puddle in a corner. And so, it's really about, learning that happy medium. And that has been a very valuable life lesson for me, both in work and at home, because I really will spin out of control about that stuff.
It's my dad used to say, if you're not a little bit afraid, you're probably not paying attention. I think that was some good advice.
Hence why I tried not to pay attention.
Well, the flip side for me, as opposed to the two of you, is that I get bored at the same rate as the general public, I've noticed over time. And so
what's that, like 30 seconds?
Yeah, pretty much. And so if I'm sort of starting to think something is, old news, then I'm usually in tune with consumers in that sense, with
millennials.
Really anybody, even in my generation. So I know that that pushes me to move forward. That's kind of one of the drivers is, this is old. This is, these things are coming. We've got to, move on that. But the joy of working with you two and the team we've put together, Capricorns, many of you, is
we're holding on for dear life.
Well, you're holding my feet closer to the ground too.
We're mountain goats. We just hold on to the side of the cliff. Everything is an emergency.
Oh, we try not to do that. Gosh.
But Peter, you said something. You've said it a few times, which is that some mentor of yours years ago, I think, told you that it was your dad, actually, I believe, said that, you have to be able to look long-term and short-term at the same time.
Right. That was actually the big lesson coming out of business school. That was the that was the big takeaway, was if you focus on the short term. We saw in case after case, we studied that the companies that just focused on the short term got smacked by big changes coming their way. The companies that just focused on where things were going ran out of cash. Basically, because they weren't paying close enough attention to what was happening. And the thing that came through about that was that the skill sets of paying close attention to the short term and the long term are very different. It's hard to be really good at both those things, and it's hard to have the time to focus on both those things. But we saw again and again that was the companies that did best were doing both those things and didn't.
Yeah, I think like organizations. Enron was focusing on the short term. Yeah. And organizations that eventually focus, too much in either direction, they just fail. They either can't adapt quickly enough, or they just become old news.
Yeah.
Yep. And go by the wayside.
And then in the venture world, you get all these companies that are, pre-revenue, or, they're all about building something really big, but they're, revenues, profits, whatever,
that just eludes me.
Well, there are times when it works. Some of the biggest companies out there, Facebook, let's just go with, Instagram, WhatsApp, all those companies, they had no revenue model, but they were aggregating huge numbers of people. But the problem is you get an economic downturn like the one we're in, and your investors all sit on their hands and let you die. And I experienced that dynamic back in 2000 when I was a venture-backed entrepreneur for the first time, and watched the dot bomb, explode, and all of those sort of first wave internet companies just go by the wayside.
Yeah. So that's our challenge now.
Yeah.
Well, it always has been, right?
What are what are some of, maybe if you have one or two, of the most moving stories coming out of Lionrock, things that have just touched you and stuck with you, of people that we've been able to help? This is not live, so take your time.
No, I remember one day I was we remodeled our house a few years ago, and it was like many remodels, a disaster. It took too long, went over budget, contractor absconded with some money.
It was a remodel.
It was a remodel.
It was an average remodel.
Right. And I remember I was in the backyard one day, and I was like just on the verge of tears just from this, the stress of doing this. And, my family and I, we had taken up residence in a camper in the backyard, and we thought it was just going to be for 6 months or 12 months. It ended up being like 18 months. It was a lot longer than we had planned for. And I was just super stressed out, and I got a call from one of our clients, just telling me how well she was doing. It was a while after she had gone through the program with us, and she called just like randomly and was just telling me how great she was doing, and she was crying and just how grateful she was for the opportunity to have done that, and how we stuck with her when everybody else was going to kick her out, and didn't, her husband didn't believe in her, and her friends didn't believe in her, and like we kept going, and so like that kind of thing on a really bad day for me, like was so much, like just lifted me up and was like, oh, okay, this is a good reason to, just keep slogging through this. Yeah.
I think for me, it was, I had put together a focus group for, I can't remember what, something that I was thinking about, wanted to test out with people. And it was live. And, as we've gotten bigger, my contact with our clients, sort of direct live contact has been limited to, tech support, like Iain was saying, which I really don't do that often anymore. Poor Iain, he gets to do it more. And so here I was in a video conference with, 15 of our former clients doing this. And as we opened, we just, made a little introduction. Who are you? We didn't know each other. And every one of them said the most incredibly kind and loving and grateful things to me about Lionrock. And it was overwhelming. I mean, I thought I was going to cry right there, which I really didn't want to do. But it was amazing, an amazing experience, actually. Because, most work is work, and most companies you work for, there's some satisfaction for sure, but you're not feeding starving children, as we always used to say when I worked in the video game business. And here we are not feeding starving children either, but it's a lot closer. So that experience was quite something. That'll stay with me.
Yeah. One of the most amazing conversations I had was with Kara Israel, who's on our podcast, who I interviewed, and talking to her when she was dying from liver failure and not able to get on any list because no one would take her because they wanted her to take a drink in order to get into treatment. But she'd been sober too long, right? She'd been sober too long. So her policy wouldn't put her as at risk. So she wasn't going to be able to get into treatment. And if she wasn't going to be able to get in treatment, she wasn't going to be able to get a new liver. And she has horrendous cirrhosis, and she's rural. And I just remember her telling me about what it was like to be accepted into Lionrock, finding Lionrock, and what it was like to be accepted, and how much more she gained, than she thought she would ever have. She thought she was coming in to sort of get a liver and be on, check the box, right? And she had no idea how much she had to learn. And just seeing these stories of people who really embraced and how well it's worked, and how the team came together, and how much they feel, it's one thing to there's treatment centers or places I've been there where I've gotten a lot of great information, but I don't feel love towards the center, like I'm not the people or whatever. I don't feel like they're part of my family or that I want to hang out with them, and so it's so cool to hear people have that experience.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for.
I think that what is cool that's different about us, that you were talking earlier about the push right now to just medicate people, whether it's for alcoholism or for opioids, but we've all got so much stuff to heal from. Like, I don't care what incredible amazing household you grew up in. Like there's stuff just being in the world is sort of traumatizing for people, right? Like whether it's your gender identity or something, like there's a lot of the world that just doesn't really want you to be you, And so we all have a lot of work to do to like get through that, get okay with it. And I think a lot of, just handing somebody a pill isn't going to get them there. And so what we see with our clients, like just when we learned yesterday, like our clients had bonded so much, they did an online cooking class together. Like that was such a cool thing to hear about, that this had just spontaneously like grown up from the bonds that these people had made. That, just going into the doctor, getting a pill, even if your doctor had given you some counseling or something like that, it's not the same as really getting in and being able to do the kind of deep work. I think our clients appreciate the opportunity to, go deep.
Yeah, I think it's something it's so easy to be surface level in a clickbait, world that we live in. We all can do it. It's
fix.
Quick. Yeah. Like it's all super easy. I mean, it's interesting that you say that, like even the act of being born is traumatic for everyone involved. Let's be clear. It is a traumatic, but that traumatic coming in, you go from being amphibious to not, it's a traumatic, and there's big T, little t, as we talk about, and all of us have those, marks and things to heal from. So I think that's super important, and something I always talk about here, which is like, whatever you're recovering from, it doesn't matter what it is. Like we're all trying to be better than we were yesterday. And we're recovering from whatever it is by trying to be better than we were yesterday.
Yeah. And learning new skills. And life is a rough and tumble kind of thing, like you said. I mean, just being born. I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck when I was born, and
that explains a lot.
That explains why I'm so difficult, right? But yeah, I mean, it's rare to have a birth go smoothly, and
I mean, and even when it's smooth,
right? The baby's coming out, getting bright lines shone in its face, and something stuffed down its throat.
Mom is screaming,
right?
Yeah. It's an intense,
and that's just the first 5 minutes of your life, So, right. The opportunity for people to really go in and resolve those things, and it's a lifelong process,
to learn grit and resilience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone once, I was whining and complaining about having, addictionism, whatever you want to call it, and how like, it's not fair. I've recovered from enough. I've given up enough stuff. I'm blah, 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 blah. And like, how long is it going to take me to be a normal person? And, and they said, well, if it takes you your whole life to save your life, will it still be worth it? I was like, oh no. Does that mean, but I started thinking about like, how long, what's worth it, right? Like if my whole life I have to work on saving my life, like, is that worth it? And I think to some degree, those of us who are in recovery, that's the gig, man. Like that's what we're signing up for.
Think about life and its, basic unit, right? It's staying alive and eating. So it's kind of the same thing. You're still having to, if you can't find food every day, and if you can't, evade the leopard, so it's the same kind of thing. Right.
It's perspective though. It's,
it's an awful bro-y thing that gets said in the startup world, but there's plenty of time to sleep when you die, and although that's a terrible sentiment in the way it's expressed, it's true. Life it's going to be work.
Yeah, that's underrating sleep. And as a mom to toddlers, I think
it's true. You got to sleep. You got to sleep.
Well, I love you guys. Yeah. A metaphor?
What? Yeah, it's a metaphor.
For not sleeping?
No, for what life is like. You do actually have to sleep.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know. Trying to convince other people that is, different story. Well, I love you guys so much. And thank you for being on here and talking to me. And hopefully people were excited to hear from us. And we'll have you back on and talk about it in another maybe 5 years this time. And hopefully the pandemic will be done and we'll be experiencing some of that. What's our prediction? 5 years, March in 5 years. Just say you throw something out there, because if you would have thrown pandemic out there, nobody would have believed it, right? So
5 years in March from now?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Well, the current economy will have healed itself, so It won't be that.
Murder hornets are in the White House.
Could be murder hornets. Could be murder hornets.
Okay.
It will actually be time for another presidential election. So whatever happens this time will be over that thing. So that'll be interesting. I wish I could see that far.
Mexico
invades the U.S. No. What?
Mexico returns the wall. Oh, no, Mexico builds a wall. No, Mexico builds the wall to keep us out.
I think they're already doing that.
Yeah.
They're already trying to keep us out.
Okay.
Now, 5 years from now, I know, maybe I'll be retired. Okay, maybe not that.
Okay. No, that's good. All right. And it's very, pandemic of you. Ian?
Yeah.
5 years from now.
In March
of 5 years from now. Yeah, the worst of COVID will be behind us, but it's still going to be around. We will have face masks will be a new fashion accessory, like sunglasses. Maybe they'll even integrate a face mask sunglass. It'll be like Google Glass with a face mask attached.
Like that. It'll be a helmet.
No need for contouring, I guess.
We'll have a woman president, and what else? Jerry Seinfeld will come back to sitcom television.
Okay.
He'll come out of retirement.
Yeah. Peter will go in. Jerry Seinfeld comes out.
He's out.
Okay, well, you heard it here, folks. We'll come back to see how our prediction. I don't know. Wait. Oh, I have to predict. My prediction. Let's see.
Murder hornets.
My prediction is that something will happen with the airline industry is going to do something crazy to come up with some crazy new business model, or someone that will completely disrupt the airline industry that isn't NetJets.
All right.
There you go.
Idea.
It's a big idea.
Yeah, that's out there. Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is sponsored by Lionrock Recovery. Lionrock provides online substance abuse counseling where clients can get help from the privacy of their own home. They are accredited by the Joint Commission, and sessions are private, affordable, and user-friendly. Call their free helpline at 800-258-6550 or visit www.lionrockrecovery.com for more information.